So I thought today I would show you what a Bible drill looks like, and each of our Bible curriculum has Bible drills in it, and this one is taken from our Foundations of Apostolic Scriptures, which is part of Homeschooling Torah's membership. And our kids were doing today the word unbelief. Now, I haven't told them what the word of the day is. I'm just going to tell them to look up Matthew 13:58, and they're going to put their arms up in the air, and as fast as possible, they are going to try to find the verse. So it's like a race. And you can see that the words I'm going to give them are all over it. And let's see how long it takes them to figure out what the key word of the day is. My kids are using, two of my kids are using the New King James, and one of my children is using the NIV. And so we'll see how easy it is, because sometimes the different translations use different words. These are all from the King James. So this will be fun. Okay. All right, the next one is Romans 3:3.
Romans 3:3.
Go. Candace.
What if some were unfaithful? Will their unfaithfulness nullify God's faithfulness?
Unbelief. Yours says unbelief. We're in two different versions. Okay, Bible's up.
I would like to explain to you how to teach Bible, because Bible to me is the most fundamental of all the subjects. And this was the first subject that we wrote way back. We weren't even called Foundations Press yet. I was just Anne's School Place. It was just a little blog, and we made several different kinds of curriculum. This was the first one, Foundations 1, Foundations 2, and Foundations 3. My husband and I made those because we wanted to be able to teach the Bible to all of our children at the same time. That was the first thing. I was seeing some homeschooling curriculum that had a different Bible class for every student, and sometimes as they got into the older grades, that meant that they did Bible on their own. And I just thought, that doesn't fit what I'm reading in the Bible about the responsibility of parents to teach the Bible to their children, to teach His commands, to teach how to walk with Him, to teach everything that's included in the Bible. So if I send my kids off, how am I going to have these discussions? How am I going to know if what is in the curriculum is even accurate? So I didn't really want my children to do all the Bible on their own, nor did I have time to teach a separate class to each of my 7 children. At this time, I think when we started writing this, I had 4 children, probably pregnant with my 5th. And the other thing, and you can see this from the title called Foundations. This was where we first called ourselves Foundations Press. I wanted to make sure that my children were firmly grounded in all of the Bible. So they had to read the foundation of the Tanakh, or the Old Testament as it's commonly called, before they would understand who Yeshua, their Messiah, is and what He did for them. It just didn't seem right to me to skip over all of those important foundational truths and just get to the good stuff in the gospel. And that's what I saw in so many Christian homeschooling companies. Now, this was before my husband and I were walking in Torah. When we wrote this, we'd never heard of Torah. And, it says Christ our Messiah. We hadn't heard of anything but Jesus, and we didn't know that we could walk in the Torah. But I think the Father guided us, because really all these books are just reading through the Bible with our children and discussing it. In fact, after we came to Torah, we went back through those books because we're like, we're going to teach people not to keep Torah. And we went through them, and there was really nothing to change. Everything, because we were just going verse by verse, book by book, it didn't need to be changed because His word is true. So that was cool. Later, we developed Foundations of Torah, and I'll show you that real quick. This was the first thing. We developed this in 2013, which would be 10 years ago now, right when we were starting Homeschooling Torah. Now, the books weren't in print at that time. We just wanted our customers to be able to go through every single Torah portion with their children. The thing that was really cool to us about that was at this time, we were attending a Messianic congregation, and they would read from the Torah scroll every single Sabbath, and my children had never read through the Torah. And so we were thinking, how are our children going to be ready for Sabbath? When they get to the congregation on Sabbath, how are they going to know what they're talking about? And I thought it was really awesome. The pastor there would always preach it wasn't always from the Torah portion, but he would always connect the Torah portion to what he was preaching, whether it was from anywhere in the Bible. And he would always also do a children's teaching, and the children's teaching was always in some way connected to the Torah portion. And so we resolved at home, we were going to start on Monday, and Monday through Friday we were going to study the Torah, so that when our kids got to Sabbath fellowship, they would say, "Oh yeah, we've been talking about that at home," and that was our intent behind it. Now, over the years, it has definitely morphed into more. We now have journals that the kids can write in, and that has been really cool to be able to watch the children be able to have their own record of what they are learning. So that was the beginning. And now over at Homeschooling Torah, we actually have even more Bible curriculum that is not in print. We have foundations of Tanakh, which is the Tanakh. It's just not the Torah. Tanakh is just an acronym. And so the Torah is the first part of the word Tanakh, and Nach is the second part, which is the writing and the prophets. And so we go through the writings and the prophets. It could be done in 2 years. It is much deeper. So, you know, if you want to do it in 1 year, then you're going to want to assign some of the readings to your kids on their own, or you could take it in 2 years. And we don't have that in print yet. That's coming. And then we also have the foundations of the apostolic scriptures, which would be everything from Matthew to Revelation. And we study it in light of the Torah. And I think of all of the curriculum, that one is probably the meatiest. And it makes sense. We start with the foundations with our younger kids, and we want to go to the meatier stuff as they get older. So I would recommend, don't start in apostolic scriptures. I would recommend you start in the Torah or these foundations books and go through the whole Bible that way, then start getting into the Tanakh and then getting into the apostolic scriptures towards the end. That's what I would recommend. Now, what about the little ones? I mean, you could do foundations one with your little ones. It has some ideas for adapting it to just preschool, but we also have now foundations of preschool, and this is available to our Homeschooling Torah members as well. And every week we have a Bible story. So as they learn a letter, so A, ask, they're also going to learn how Hannah asked for a son. And this is a 2-page story. It's adapted straight from the Bible. So we didn't dumb it down in any way. It's definitely just Bible. It's not any of our own opinion or thought. We have had some customers say that reading straight from the Bible, even with a more modern translation, was a little hard for their preschoolers. What we were intending is for you to read that. So this is the letter A story. We were intending you to read that one every single day for a whole week, and also memorize the verse with them. And then the next week go to the letter B, and which would be believe in the Master Yeshua HaMashiach, and that's Paul and Silas in prison. And so and read that every single day for a whole week. And again, it's taken straight from the Bible, so it's definitely how it is listed in the Bible. And so we recommend that you read them over and over and over again, because preschool students like to have the stories read over and over and over. I think when we read things repeatedly, it helps us to learn it better. And oftentimes it seems like when they get a new story, they're like fidgety, but by the end of the week, they know exactly what's going to happen next. So that was the intent for that. So that's a little overview of the Bible curriculum that we have at Homeschooling Torah. There are 5 things that we intend, maybe not with preschool, but with kindergarten and on up, once they're learning to do school. We have 5 things that we intend for you to do with all of your children together every single day. And by the way, except for preschool, you could do that one with your older kids too. All of those are intended to do as an entire family. So, begin by reading the Bible aloud. So Bible curriculum is nothing if you don't read the Bible. And we really intend for you to read it aloud as a family. Now, you could do that in multiple different ways. You could take turns reading aloud and so on. And I'm going to come back to learning to read the Bible in just a second. But it's also a great time for you as mom or dad to read. And if you can get your husband to be participating in this part of the curriculum, that would be fantastic. But if not, come and report to him on Friday evening at Erev Shabbat and say, this is what we learned, Dad, and this was our memory verse, and so on. So number 1, we wanted our kids to be able to read the Bible aloud. Number 2, we wanted our kids to learn to use their own Bibles. So learning to use a Bible, this is a New King James Bible here, and I'm noticing that there are so many different translations, even more so than when we started 10 years ago. And a lot of our customers are wanting to use more of a Jewish order to the books of the Bible. So you need to teach your children the order of the books of the Bible and have them practice using their Bibles, looking things up, finding things quickly, knowing which books are in the Torah, which books are in the prophets, which books are in the writings, which ones were written by Paul, which ones were the Gospels, where's the prophecy. And so whether you do it with the English order of the books of the Bible or the Jewish order, it doesn't matter. Either one is good. But I think your children definitely need to have their own Bibles and learn to use it. Now, I get asked a lot, what's a good Bible you recommend for your children? Well, that's not going to be something I'm going to be able to recommend. We as a family love the New King James Version in English, but we are also working on learning to read the Bible in Hebrew. So it depends on what the goals for your family are. Do you want it to be something that's incredibly close to the original manuscripts and doesn't err from those at all? Then I like the New King James. That's a good one. Or the King James as well. Now the King James would have the advantage of using some of the older English, and your children would learn how to understand the these and the thous and so on. And that's not a bad thing. It's much better to use the Bible than Shakespeare for that. They would be able to understand anything else written in English if they used King James. There are also more modern translations, the English Standard Version or the NIV or the New American Standard. And those are not quite as close to the original manuscripts, but they are maybe a little bit more understandable. One year, our family, and this was a long time ago now, but one year we went through the Living Bible. Now, the Living Bible is notoriously against Torah, but it gave us a lot of opportunities to discuss, and it was really easy to understand. So, you could do that. If you're going to use a Hebrew Roots kind of version, you've got the Institute for Scripture Research, which the ISR, the Scriptures, that's an excellent one. To me, it's about on the level of an English Standard Version in its accuracy, so it's not quite as close as the New King James, but on the other hand, it already has all the names changed. So if you want to say the sacred name in the way that your family pronounces it, that's an ideal way to go. And also, if you'd like to learn how to pronounce Hebrew words and Hebrew names, that's going to be very helpful. And it's got the books of the Bible in order, just like they are in the Jewish Bible instead of in the English Bible. So that's really handy. Another one would be the Complete Jewish Bible, a little bit easier to understand and read, but it's going to say Adonai instead of the name of the Creator. So you'd have to switch that. But to me, I don't mind having my children learn to switch it. So in my Bible, it's going to say, "Take heed and listen, O Israel. This day you have become the people of the Lord." Okay, that's what it's going to say, all capitals, Lord. And so when my children read, we just have them learn to use their Bible. We have them say, "Listen to the voice of Yehovah," or maybe you say Yahweh or Yahuwah. So change it to how your family says it, and have your kids get used to it. When they're reading it in the New Testament, they shouldn't have any trouble learning to read when it says Jesus. They should automatically switch that to Yeshua, and so on with Christ. We switch it to Messiah, and so on. I'm sure you've seen me do that even on the videos. But something that we teach our children to do from the time they're very little. It's no harder for them to do that than it is to learn a sight word, where they see the word and just pronounce it. So they see Jesus and they say Yeshua. It's no harder than that. It's a habit, and I think it's a great thing to do at home. So we have our children read from the Bible. We read with them aloud. 2, we learn to use our Bibles. 3, we discuss. This, again, is the heart of our curriculum. It's the heart of what I think the Bible says we should do with our children. We discuss it with them every single day. So as you're reading, you can talk about it. Now, this is something really important. I think that your children, you need to build up their attention span. When you are first beginning to read as a family from the Bible, you're only going to be able to read a verse or two before you have to stop and discuss it, because they're not going to remember everything. You're not going to remember everything. So have smaller sections and then stop and discuss. So if you're using the Bible curriculum from Homeschooling Torah and you see that on each page there are discussion questions, you can see there are several questions listed here. So as you start reading the Bible, Mom, look ahead, peek at those discussion questions and kind of get a glimpse of what verses they're going to get the questions from, and know when to stop. And so when you get to that part of the chapter that you're reading aloud and you know there's going to be a discussion question, you say, okay, let's stop there for a second. Let's discuss that. And that way they don't have to remember. Now, as your children have matured, both in age and in attention span and an ability to remember what they have read, you might try reading an entire section, entire chapter, and then going back and reviewing what you've learned. Now that's good because it's going to increase their longer term memory. So both are excellent, but I don't think you should try to shoot for such a long section of reading with having to remember it from the very beginning. I think you should be reasonable and realistic and start with small sections. Okay, when I get to a part of the Bible that's a little bit more difficult, specifically the apostolic scriptures, like let's say the book of Galatians or the book of Hebrews. We read this as a family this year. When we get to Hebrews, oh my goodness, there are places that I can only go up like one little verse and I have to stop, and we're going to have too long of a discussion. So it's just, there's a lot packed and it's pretty meaty. So so that was number 3. Number 4, we want to memorize the Bible. And so every single week in our curriculum, we have a memory verse. And this goes from preschool through every single piece of curriculum that we have written. Sometimes we are memorizing just one verse. Sometimes we take 4, 5, 6 weeks to memorize a whole entire passage. So I think it's really important to say those verses as a family every day. Usually this is how I do it. First of all, explain what the verse means, because it's really hard to memorize a verse if we don't understand what it means. Now, the younger the child is, the seemingly better they do at just rote memory. But I think it's always important to take time to discuss, what is this verse even saying? Why do you think that Mrs. Elliott put it in the curriculum this week? Number 2, it's really a lot easier to memorize a verse if it's meaningful to you, Mom. If this verse is important to you and special, I don't know if you can relate it to your own life and why this verse is important. Like some of the verses that talk about how he's going to bring his people back to him at the end times. And I think, oh my goodness, that's us. I can get all teary-eyed on the kids in the Bible lesson that day. And it's just so special. Or maybe I want to share my testimony, or where did I first hear that verse? And help your children understand, maybe this verse is helping them overcome a sin, or giving them advice on how to live their life, or how to get along with their friends and companions. So try to make the verse more meaningful to you. Thirdly, I think it's really great to try to use as many of your 5 senses as you learn a Bible verse as possible. So that means that I'm going to get up and move around, use motions, okay? We're going to be looking at a verse visual. So I like to write the verse up on the blackboard and nice and big. And I have my kids write the verse as well. That's part of our week, every single week, because that's visual, and it's also a sensory thing as you're moving your arms and legs. You're going to hear each other saying it. You can have everyone say it as a group, or call on individual people to say it. Even if they have to read it, they're still saying it and other people are hearing it, and that's using their sense. And sometimes you get a verse that's just awesome for taste or smell. Like if it says that the Torah of Yehovah is sweet like honey, it's time to break out the honey, dude. All right? So you want to do that, and you want to try to bring as many senses as possible. For kids, it's good to get up and down and stand a time to say it. Now sit one time to say it. Now get in a little ball on the floor and say it. Now jumping jacks. Let's do jumping jacks, okay? Repeating the verse as many times as possible will really help cement it in their mind. So definitely do that. And I like to use a sing-songy voice. So a sing-songy voice helps me say things. So let's do Psalm 23 verse 1. Yehovah, that's how we say his name. Yehovah is my shepherd. I shall not want. If I were a song leader, Yehovah is my shepherd. I shall not want. That didn't work very well, did it? Let me do another one. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. One of the reasons that we put King James as some of those memory verses, and of course you're welcome to switch it to any version you like. One of the reasons we use King James is because it's very sing-songy. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. Does that make sense? That sing-songiness where it gets 2 sides of your brain, first of all, because the music part of your brain and the chanting is very different from the rote, how we normally speak. So you're activating different parts of your brain, and you're going to increase the memory. But also, as we apply it to our hearts, we're going to put it down literally in our hearts, and it's going to be able to stay there. So you're putting in multiple places in their body, and that is going to increase the possibility that they are going to be able to use it in their actual life. And that's really the point, is you want your kids to know this and remember it for the rest of their lives. So lastly, but definitely not least, I want my children to journal. I want them to write, why is this important? So in this, I should have shown you the front of the book. This is in Foundations of Torah in the early years book. And in this week, they're learning, give thanks unto Yehovah, call upon his name, make known his deeds among the people. So they're talking about being thankful, and it says, draw a picture of something you are thankful for. Now, this book is intended for children who don't yet read well on their own, and that's why it's got very simple things that they're tracing and so on. It's not intended for someone who can already read well. But that drawing a picture of something they are thankful for is so helpful. Now let me find that in the middle years book. And middle years is intended for students who now can read independently. So this would be maybe 4th, 5th grade, somewhere in there. You can use your determination in your family. So I'm going to turn to that same page in this book. So very similar. Give thanks unto Yehovah, call upon his name, make his deeds known among the people, draw something you're thankful for. A little bit more detailed. Now we have cursive and they're writing it on the lines. But then on the next page, it says, what did you learn? Write a paragraph telling about something you learned this week and draw a picture if you'd like. Now they're thinking through the entire thing that they've learned that week and they're going to journal it. Now do you have to have this book to do that? No. In fact, we didn't have them until we invented these books either. So you could do that, with just a 3-ring binder and put your notebook paper on and have them draw a picture or a spiral notebook or whatever. You don't have to use that. Now let me show you how it is in the high school book. The high school book is intended for students that could do this completely on their own, and for that reason we even include the discussion questions in here in case they are ever doing that. Now let me find that section. Okay, so in this one it says, and you can see it's quite a bit different, and we have the same verse, give thanks unto Yehovah and call upon his name and make known his deeds among the people. But it says, with pen in hand, illustrate the memory verse to help you visualize its meaning. While you draw, you can meditate on God's word and memorize the text. So they're drawing as well. Drawing it uses a different part of the brain than writing. But now they're going to answer a lot of questions. Here, write the memory verse. That's what they do first. What error? Notice it's much smaller because they don't need the big whole page for it. What error should I avoid? What example should I follow? What promises are given? What commands did I learn? How did this passage point to the Messiah? And that's meaning the whole thing they read that week, not just the memory verse. And what do I need to most to apply to my life today? So that by the time they filled out an entire book with all of those and journaled all of that out, you really know that they know it. And that's why we want to do it. So I know this is Bible curriculum, and I'm talking most about having that time where you get into the Word each day, but you could also use the Bible to teach your children to read. I want you to make sure that you are reading the Bible with your children and to your children. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, reading with them means that maybe they read the easier words and you read the harder words, or they read one verse, you read one verse, or if it's in the Psalms or Proverbs, you read one line, they read one line. Maybe you start reading the sentence and they finish the sentence, or the other way around. They start the sentence and you finish the sentence. And as they get older and their reading ability strengthens, they can read the entire sentence or the entire paragraph. Or, my goodness, now that my children are in high school, we actually take turns. And on one day of the week, it's Alistair's turn to read, and another day it's Casey's, and another day it's Candace's, and then it's my day, and so on. And we just keep going around. When your children are older, you definitely should take turns reading aloud at all possible. Mom and Dad, you need to read too. First of all, they need to hear your example of how to read with good inflection and meaning and really make it understandable. Two, you want to be able to have your children learn that they can only get the answers for the discussion questions from the Bible itself. So when there's a discussion question in here, let me read one here. Okay, let's pretend we're in Genesis chapter 45, and it says, did Joseph think that his brothers had completely changed? And my kids would probably go, no. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not the answer I want. What I want them to do, and it has this in the book, is open up to Genesis 45 and go to verse 24. And they all have to open their Bible to do this. Of course, they're already right there in Genesis because they've been reading it that day. And it says, and then we're going to read the verse. So he sent his brothers away, and they departed, and he said to them, see that you do not become troubled along the way. And And so now the answer is going to be, well, he didn't think his brothers had changed because he warned them not to get all troubled about everything on the way home, like he knew they had a habit of doing. And so it's a lot more thoughtful to pull your answer directly from the text as much as possible. That's so important. And when you're reading together, back and forth, taking turns reading, it really helps to have everybody understand the text better. And you don't check out, you're not daydreaming, thinking about the lawnmower outside and so on. You're paying attention to what's being said. Also, when you're reading aloud together, it's okay to stop and say, let's everybody look up in the concordance. I love having Bible resources on our shelf. Some standard ones that I recommend everyone have. There's 3. And that would include a Strong's Concordance. I think everyone should have an in-print Strong's Concordance in their home so their children can learn to look up things, and you want to learn to use it. The instructions are in the book. I know it's a really thick book, but go read the instructions at the front. There's instructions in the back by the dictionary. Make sure that you get straight from the publisher how to use that book. And by the way, this is fantastic for dictionary skills. You can count this off as some language arts work every single day that you look up something in a concordance. Secondly, I think everyone should have a lexicon. A lexicon is a slightly different thing than a concordance, and it is great for etymology. And again, I love things like that. If you're going to use it for language arts, a lexicon is a thing to have. And my favorite is Jeff Benner's Ancient Hebrew Lexicon. I like it because it brings in the same kind of understanding and belief that we have to the lexicon. And thirdly, I think everyone should have a Bible atlas. Those are the minimum. You could also have books on the tabernacle and temple so that kids could see what they're reading about. You could have books about Bible manners and customs. You could have a Bible dictionary, although you're going to probably get a much more Christian dictionary there than necessarily a Torah observant perspective, but they're still helpful. So those are just some books that are really nice to have on your shelf. You're going to also want to expect your children to learn to read their Bibles on their own. And I know I've said a lot about doing it together, and I do mean that. But I also want to give my kids the skill that when they leave my home someday, they are in the habit of reading their Bible every day. So this is how I do it. And by about first grade, they can read words. They can decode most syllables, at least one syllable or maybe 2 syllable words. They know that most of their phonograms. And so at that point, I'm just having them read with me in Bible time. Second grade, same thing. They can now read a whole verse at a time. They can read multiple syllables, and they could possibly, by the end of second grade, they should be able to read an entire sentence, a whole verse or more. By third grade, they can read syllables and entire paragraphs, and many students by third grade are beginning to read independently. And if they're not, this is where you start. So what if they don't pick up a chapter book? But you do want them to start picking up their Bible. So in third grade, we have some really easy Torah Bible reading schedules on our website, so that every single day for 180 days, they have a Bible reading assignment. They can read it to you, but you eventually want to have them read it by themselves. And if you're not sure they're understanding it or actually reading it, then they need to come to you and tell you what they read about that day, which that's a really handy way to check up on your kids, make sure they're actually reading and not just sitting in the corner looking at their book. Don't ask me how I know this happens. Pretending to read their Bible and then off to play. No, they need to come to you and tell you a little bit about what they learned that day. By fourth grade, they can read entire chapters. They read independently. And in fourth grade, our Bible reading schedule has an easy overview of the entire Old Testament. Not every single chapter, but an easy overview. By fifth grade, they can certainly start reading the entire Bible. I wouldn't necessarily have them do it because it's such a long hunk of time and they're not quite that quick at reading. So in fifth grade, we usually assign some easy parts of the Old Testament and the Gospel. So we're adding a little bit more every year. By sixth grade, I have my students read the entire Old Testament. By seventh grade, I have them read the entire New Testament. And by eighth grade and up, I'm having them read all of their Bible every single year. So they have read their whole Bible now 5, 6, 7 times before they even graduate from high school. And to me, there's really nothing more comforting to know as they go out into the world that they really do know their Bible. Again, don't forget to discuss it with them. And also, we think it's important at Homeschooling Torah to include copy work. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about copy work in another session on language arts. But copy work is a fantastic way to have them copy as much of the Bible as they possibly can during their growing up years so that they truly have it in their hearts. So that's an overview of how we do Bible curriculum at Homeschooling Torah and just some ideas what it looks like at our home. How long does this take you every day, Anne? Well, I would say about 30 minutes for us as a family to read and discuss it together, do our Bible memory verses, and sometimes I assign the journals for later. Sometimes I have them do it while we're reading. So 30 minutes on a really interesting day when we just cannot help ourselves, then maybe 45. But as I've said in other sessions, you want to cut it off because you have other things to do that day. You can always come back to it tomorrow. Secondly, for their independent Bible reading time, I would say 10, 15, 20 minutes, depending on their age and how much they're reading. So that's something they do on their own, though, and that would be on their own independent assignment chart that they have, and they check it off and maybe I can ask them questions about it. Definitely at least once a week, check up with your kids and make sure that they're understanding what they're reading. For copy work, I'd say, again, 20 to 30 minutes each child doing their copy work. It depends on the age. For younger children, it would be much shorter than that. So again, that's something they do on their own. So how much time do you as a mom need for Bible every day? 30 minutes, and occasionally when you're really long-winded, 45. So I think that would do it.